All right, so we're going to talk about your informative speeches today, and so there's a couple of things that you need to know. First off, your question for me is, what am I going to speak about? And there are different types of informative speeches. You can see them listed up here. We have objects, processes, events, concepts. And so first thing first, you can talk about an object. Maybe you have some interesting artifact, an interesting piece of art, or something like a snowboard, something that has different parts to it. You don't want to just talk about a pencil, I don't think, because you won't have enough. You just won't have enough interesting material and enough interesting ways to engage us. But think of something that that would be useful. Maybe it's your new iPhone or something like that, and you want to explain what it does and how it does it, and you'll talk about that object. Next would be processes. This would be how to do something. Maybe you can take us through the process of applying for school, donating blood, taking a trip to Portugal, whatever you would like to do that way. Question? The next one is events. Talk about, I think I mentioned these last week, you could talk about Halloween, you could talk about graduation, you could talk about your birthday, right? I mean, it has to be an interesting kind of a thing. Again, something that will be engaging. Consider your audience when you're deciding on a topic. And the last one is a concept. Maybe you want to talk about a concept like democracy, freedom, hope, love, joy, any of these things that you could explain to us with interesting examples and something that would be meaningful for you to talk about. If you can hit on one of those things, you'll be in good shape. Questions about those? Okay, so once you have kind of a general idea, you need to decide how to kind of structure that. And we break up informative speeches in three ways. There's a description, an explanation, or an instructional type of speech. So instructional really is that how-to kind of thing, how to do this, and you'll take us step by step through it. A description might be that object speech where you're going to describe what is, you're going to describe the object, explain it, or tell us, here's the different parts, this is how they work. That would be the description speech. And then you have your explanation speech, where you're going to really go into deep detail. So your concept speech would probably be an explanation speech. Maybe your process speech could overlap that way a little bit as well. But you want to decide what you want to do with that topic. Is your goal just to tell us about it, or are you going to actually give us some skill, teach us some way to do that? I'll show you a video in a little while of an informative speech teaching you how to learn Chinese, which is kind of an interesting skill. And but it's very informative, and it's very much an explanation of how to do it, how the Chinese language is built, and how you can understand some of those, some parts of that language. So in your informative speech, so you need to pay attention, this is not a persuasive speech. These are usually not very controversial. You're not really trying to change our attitude about it. You're just trying to get me to understand your topic. Present the information. Teach us something new. The best speeches that I've seen are the ones where we learn something new about a topic that might be a little bit more obscure. Do we need to learn how to make our bed every day? Probably not, right? Most of you, well, some of you do that on occasion, right? But you probably don't need to learn that. But learning Chinese, learning how to put something together, how to build something, how to do something that we would need, some skill that most of us don't have, would be very useful. I had a student once who taught us in a very useful way how to change the oil in the car, and most people don't know how to do that. And so that was a pretty interesting speech and pretty useful for us. And again, I will, once you have some topic ideas, I want you to run those by me and we'll talk about them and make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So we're going to watch a short speech here. I want you to evaluate this as far as think about what is our speaker talking about, how well does she organize her information, and maybe what are some of the highlights, what are some of the lowlights in what she does. So we'll watch this, and then we'll talk about it here in just a minute.